guys want to enter, you can win a Surface something.
Pro 4.
Surface Pro 4. So to enter, it's hashtag MSAUignite and K2 in it somewhere. Something you've learned about K2, the more entries you have, the more chance of winning. It takes in also the sentiment of your tweet, so how positive the tweet is, and that influences your percentage chance of winning down at the bottom there. And then what we'll do later is we'll spin a roulette wheel to see who the winner is on Friday, is it? Yeah, so everyone's got a chance of winning, but the more you put in there, the more chance you get of winning. And you can see some more tweets just came in there now. Good luck.
And then a little bit later on in the session, as you can see here, we have a giveaway for this session specifically. So for those of you, just kind of keep note of the things we say, because towards the end, what we'll do is ask one or two questions, and we'll pick an appropriate person to answer. And if you get the answers right, then the JBL Extreme speaker is yours. I have one of these. They're awesome. Anyway, let's get going.
Okay.
So thanks for being here today. My name is Dave Marcus. I'm the Senior VP for Strategy and Technology Alliances at K2. I'm based at our headquarters in Seattle, along with the rest of the K2 management team and then some of our organization in the US. With me today, I have Igor Juricevic. Igor is a Principal Technology Specialist based down here in Australia, one of a number of people with really deep, solid K2 experience. And the session today is really focused around a couple of things. As many of you know, we've been very heavily involved with Microsoft for many years in essentially taking a set of key Microsoft technology investments that you as customers or partners make, and then essentially helping you to leverage and get value out of those investments by applying K2 in interesting ways around those investments. And so we'll talk more about what that means today and how things are evolving, especially as Microsoft moves to the cloud, as the cloud productivity stack itself becomes more interesting and more compelling. Just before I get going, though, how many of you in the room are current K2 customers? Okay, couple. All right, awesome, about a quarter. Great stuff, fantastic. So that's kind of the gist of the session today. Igor is going to take you through a fairly comprehensive demonstration. And just to be clear, the goal for us today is not a focus necessarily that is all about K2, the product. We're going to be talking about a set of things that are happening in the industry that we think are relevant for people to look at when it comes to considerations about taking your investment across the Microsoft productivity stack particularly, and how to be able to apply that when thinking about business applications that influence business efficiencies as a whole. You could think about many of the things we're talking about here and applying them with technologies that may not necessarily be using K2. But for the purposes of what we're doing today, number one, because we are K2 and we believe that many of these things resonate, we'll be utilizing K2 as a way of being able to kind of light up some of the things that we're talking to so that you can get a feel for the context and how that all applies together. So this is sort of something that I want to, bring up. So for those of you who don't necessarily know us, and let me just build out the slide. This is the only slide that I have that's kind of about K2. For those of you who don't know us, we have been around as a product and solutions company for around 16 years or so, around 2,000 customers in just over 84 countries, and the slide's a little old, with a pretty sizable base in large enterprise customers, but in addition to that, a pretty significant base of mid-market type customers as well. And so it's not just a technology that fits into the mid-market, it can be used in a range of other places. I've put up on the right-hand side here a set of customers. I've chosen a few that we work with from a global perspective, and then a range that we have relationships with, we have formal customer engagements with here in Australia as well. The one that's kind of interesting at the very top that I'll talk about a little bit later on is that Microsoft is not just an important technology partner for us, they're also one of our most strategic adoption customers, utilizing us for some very interesting business processes, and we'll talk very briefly about those a little bit later. And again, the point is not about why it's an interesting K2 customer, but more importantly, why it is that leveraging some of the best practices that I'm going to talk to you about are relevant for them as an organization, just as it is for you. I won't talk to some of the rest of these things. Our relationship with both the analyst community as well as with senior people. For those of you who don't know Jeff Teeper, he is, for those of you who attended the keynote here run by Scott Guthrie on Tuesday morning, I believe, Jeff Teeper is essentially Scott Guthrie's counterpart, responsible for everything to do with the productivity platform where Scott essentially owns the Azure Cloud Platform on the engineering side. And we have a very deep relationship with Jeff and his team and have for many years. So let's move on. Oh, so I did want to just, so the thing at the top that I just want to bring to your attention, because many people know K2 in a range of different ways. Over the years, when you talk to people, people might turn around and say you're a company that does workflow, and other people turn around and say you're a company that does workflow for SharePoint, and other people might turn around and say you do forms, and people use us and know us in very different ways depending on how long they've been with us and what they're actually doing with our technology. At the end of the day, what we're all about is being able to bring to market a set of technologies and solutions that make it far easier for people to be able to deploy and implement business applications that service the needs of the business than ever before, and being able to do that by either completely eliminating or radically reducing the amount of custom code in those applications. That's our goal, and that's what our charter is. And then you can apply those in a range of ways, and we'll use today as a way of being able to showcase what that looks like around investments in productivity technology specifically. So let's just kind of talk a bit about the background that led to both this particular session as well as where we see things are today. Some of you may have seen a couple of these slides. I've lifted a few of them from Microsoft because they set context to what it is that we're ultimately doing. But everyone understands that there are macro trends around that are driving a more dynamic workplace. People expect today to be able to have an experience in the business that is not a whole lot different to the experience they have as a consumer. As a consumer, I pick up my phone, I go to an app store, there's an app for that, I install it, I use it, I interact, and that's the experience I want in a business context as well. And that's a big, important shift compared to what was out there 10 years ago. Device explosion, we all understand what's happening in this area, and the fact that today it's no longer appropriate to just be thinking about business applications that target either a single device or target a traditional device like a desktop-based experience. Mobile is first, but more importantly, multiple devices in this mobile context are just exploding in the market, and we need to think about what these mean. This is not just about devices from a mobility perspective, it's all about IoT. And for those of you here, I'm assuming that at this event, as well as many others, the realm of IoT and its role in the context of business applications that drive efficiencies are becoming very real for many organizations, and something that we think is something to be very, very carefully thought about. If you haven't already been kind of beaten to death on one particular topic at this particular event, it's all about analytics everywhere. And so it's not just the context around business intelligence, but it's about this idea that says trying to do something and create more efficiencies in the business is only as interesting as the ability to measure it. And once we can measure something efficiently, we can use the results of those measurements to drive making things better. And a lot of those measurements are coming out of analytics. Analytics typically fits into a sort of a traditional BI realm, but more importantly today, you're starting to see things like the proliferation of technologies like predictive analytics, machine learning, and others that are really changing the way that people think about and analyzing data and information in ways that we've never anticipated before. And all of those need to fit into your business application space. And then particularly for those of you who live in a world that is somewhat regulated, compliance and controls are super important. And what's really important here is a way of being able to figure out how not to have compliance and control overburden the ability for anyone to deliver the kind of solutions that need to be done, because it's very easy to do that. And we've seen that happen for years and years within organizations where it's so hard to innovate because of the level of compliance and controls that have been put in place, that innovation tends to sort of go out of the door and be thought about as a second category. And that's not what things should be today as the workplace evolves. On the Microsoft side, you hear Microsoft talk all the time about the fact that their productivity vision is all about this idea of do your best work and empowering people to be able to do more in a more efficient way in a business context. Through these 4 key topics over here, and I'm not going to beat them to death because every one of you in this room have seen these kind of commentary and these points coming from Microsoft. but ultimately about the idea that there are new ways of being able to interact. Enterprise social and its role, irrespective of what technology underpins that. Personalized insight, and that's an extension to the world of analytics and bringing analytics to the masses. And then being able to think about empowering organizations, both from the perspective of control and management, all the way through to empowering people to be able to do more in general, and laying down a set of capabilities that service that. These capabilities typically manifest themselves inside technologies like Office 365 and others from them as a company. What is kind of interesting for us is when we talk to customers, we hear two things. The first thing is it's not unusual to hear a customer say to us, I invested in this Office 365 thing and various other Microsoft Cloud technologies, and I feel overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed because when you take a look at all of the things that are sort of sitting in that middle area over there, Word, Excel, and Outlook, and OneDrive, and Skype, and Teams, and Planner, and we haven't even put everything here, it feels overwhelming. And a lot of the reason it feels overwhelming is because many of these things are apps in their own right. They have their own value, and they enable you to do certain things, but they are somewhat disconnected from each other. And so when it comes to actually using them in very deeply integrated ways, it's not always an easy thing to do. The other thing that's super important is that although Microsoft have a goal of trying to introduce a set of cloud application services that are relevant for people to be able to get going with quickly, use efficiently, and be able to add more of these on a regular, ongoing basis, the reality at the end of the day is that that's not what's under the covers. What's under the covers is something very different, and we'll talk more about this in a second. So when we think about what our role is and what the role is of applications in a new world, it's all about this idea that basically says that when you think about traditional development approaches, every single organization today typically has an investment in some human resources system, whether that's from SAP or from Microsoft or from Oracle or from someone else. They have investment in financial management systems. They have investments in customer relationship management systems. Some of them, depending on the industry you're in, might have an investment in supply chain. Operations is a similar kind of situation. But what's super interesting is that when you talk to the business, the needs don't stop there. The needs are all about the things that are in those little dots and the lines that join each one of these elements together. And this is about this idea that basically says, how do we think about solving that kind of problem that isn't about, in this case, 5 monolithic applications, but about thousands of apps that the business needs to make themselves more efficient as it comes to driving better customer retention, net new customers in their business, the ability to radically reduce the amount of cost to the business overall, and at the end of the day, to improve on risk and cost management for the organization. And so how do we do that? That's all about this idea of apps. And apps are all about thinking about services, and services are all about thinking about things like APIs and taking all of those and turning that into something more interesting. The problem with all of that is that when you try to take that and roll out new business applications that are touching all of these endpoints, the applications themselves become fundamentally complex. When you take traditional approaches around bringing a professional developer in who understands how to write code and talk to these systems, it's very hard for that person to be incredibly productive because they basically start from scratch. They start developing something, they deliver a solution, and then that solution is kind of a monolithic solution, and when you want the next thing, they kind of start again. And there's got to be a better way to be able to solve this kind of problem. The other big issue today especially is that 10 or 15 years ago, we'd walk into IT organizations and many of them would say, look, we're busy, but we can serve the needs of the business. Today, the needs of the business outstrip the ability for most organizations, IT organizations, to deliver by factors of 10 or 50 or even 100. And so how do we figure out how to make that better and more efficient? That's a massive problem that almost every organization has, no matter whether you are large, medium, or small. It doesn't matter. And the cost to build and scale these applications is a big deal. How do I get reusability? How do I think about being able to not just deliver the app? Because delivering an application once, you've all seen the paradigm that many people have out there today that basically says, by the time I deliver an application, the business has new needs, that require me to evolve it and change it. That's been a very well understood thing for a long time. And so change is inevitable because the business needs will always change. But when change comes about, change needs to be able to be put in place in a much more efficient way than traditionally happened. We talk to IT execs across organizations, medium and large. And one of the things that they all tell us is that they spend most of their budget today keeping the lights on rather than innovating, because it's so unbelievably complex in what they've traditionally invested in and the way that they need to think about evolving the business. The business, on the other hand, is expecting IT to innovate. That's the goal. There is no focus just on cost alone. It really is all very strongly around innovation. And you can see a comment over here, and this is just a Gartner comment, but this comment is proliferated by many analysts out there today, that say by 2020, 60% of application development at a business level will be done outside of traditional IT teams. And just to be clear what I mean by that, will not be delivered by a professional developer. Doesn't mean it won't be done in IT, but it means a pro dev won't be building the vast majority of these apps. It'll be done by people that we think about savvy IT people with a certain level of skill. It doesn't mean it's the average business user. Very commonly it isn't. But it's a very different set of people that traditionally don't spend their days building applications. So when we think as K2 about what this ultimately means, and we think about what customers want, and you take a look at this Office 365 world, it's no longer about these individual siloed apps. It's all about a set of application services that expose themselves using a set of these APIs that you see at the bottom over here. 3 of them are APIs, and 1 of them is a framework. And Microsoft evolves these frameworks all the time to try to make it more efficient and more effective for developers to use it. But in order to use the Microsoft Graph, and in order to use the client service object model, and in order to be able to work with REST, and in order to be able to use the SharePoint framework, this is largely the domain of a traditional application developer. And so there needs to be a way of being able to move the level of application development to a level that abstracts that functionality and that depth of complexity and be able to do more and do it in a different way. And so we think about the fact that these technologies offer an enormous opportunity to be able to be integrated together in some very unique ways to deliver the kind of applications to the business that are relevant, rather than just as siloed applications that you might see when you switch on Office 365 out of the box and use them as is. And that's part of the goal of what we'll talk about today. The other thing that's sort of important when it comes to thinking about what is actually happening out there is this concept that says, when I invest in a technology like Office 365, one of the things that's super interesting to me as a customer and is interesting to Microsoft particularly is getting people to adopt and drive usage. The analysts have done an inordinate amount of research on this particular topic. And this is not just statements that necessarily come from us. It's statements that come from the industry in general. To drive user adoption to more critical apps. It's interesting that over the last day or so, we've had an opportunity to talk to a lot of you in this room and many other customers as well. And one of the things that comes out very clearly is the fact that I use all these technologies, but how do I make them more relevant and more strategic to the business? That's my goal, so that I can make the platform more relevant and more strategic to the business. How do I deal with limitations that are in the technologies itself, like out-of-the-box workflow, Microsoft's challenge around deprecating the InfoPath technologies and others? How do I deal with SharePoint application models that are there for developers today, do a really good job when I'm a developer, but are still very complex to be able to work with? And then these solutions don't stand on their own. They integrate with all kinds of systems within my organization, systems in the cloud and systems on-premise. And so how do I think about bringing this all together? And it's all about a new way of thinking about building apps. So what I want to do is have Igor take you through this, because it's much easier to see what I'm talking about when you actually see something visually than just for me to talk about it specifically. And anyway, you'll get slided to death if I just continue using PowerPoints all the time. So I want to have Igor kind of articulate what I'm doing. So it's interesting. I'm a user of something like SharePoint today. And so as someone who's a user, one of the things that I want is the ability to be able to create an application that is an application that manages my suppliers, manage my customers, and manage my vendors. Sorry, my channel partners. For me, what that means is I went into SharePoint, and I use a set of SharePoint lists, and I tie them together, because that's really easy to do, and I created an app. And the app basically is go into SharePoint and capture new vendors, new customers, new partners, run some very simple workflow behind it, and I did all of that without any K2 context necessarily. It was all in the core technology. And then what started to happen is the business needs evolved. And so I started looking at this and saying, wow, the business has invested in tools like Dynamics 365, and they want to keep their information there, not inside places like SharePoint, except for documents. I need the ability, not just for me to be able to access this particular application, but for anyone to be able to access this application, including on mobile devices and outside the organization. And so how do I do that? I need the ability for the workflow to be fundamentally more comprehensive than what I'd initially put together, which was basically a simple approval cycle, and be able to do a range of things. I needed some things that I just didn't have. So as a company, we went and implemented Yammer, as an example, for enterprise social. Started to think about this and think about the fact that when I'm bringing on someone who may be a partner, a customer, or even a vendor into the organization, is there a way for me to think about socializing that experience with a range of other people as part of the process, getting their feedback and using that as part of the process to give me, as someone who's onboarding people into the company, more insight into making an effective decision in the business. And then once we've onboarded someone, we have a whole range of things that we want to do with them in a structured way. Microsoft went and introduced technologies like Planner for Office 365. And so how do I think about bringing that world into the world of this account management end-to-end lifecycle application? And so Igor and I sat together about 3 days ago because we wanted to give you a feel for kind of how productive this actually can be. And turn around and say, if I wanted to produce something like that, what would it end up looking like? And what does the experience look like when I think about applying some very fundamental best practices that I'll talk to you about in a couple of minutes after you actually see the application itself? So let me hand over to Igor, and we'll talk you through this.
Thanks, Dave. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, brilliant. All right, so my name's Igor Jurcevic, Technical Specialist with K2. I'm going to take you through a demonstration which we built over the last 2 days. So be with me. That everything is going to be live demonstration, integrating with quite a few different technologies, so you should see what happens there. And quite rightly what Dave says is we're going to be pulling a lot of these different Microsoft technologies together into a solution. And I felt quite excited about actually seeing how some of the products that are out there can actually come in and add value in scenarios that I never really thought of before, especially Yammer in partner onboarding as an example, and really getting that social aspect and feedback coming in. I thought that was really good. I'm going to try and make this interactive as well. So if you've got mobile devices and things like that, you could also participate in the demonstration. Before I start, just so I also know when and what sort of level to talk to it about, can I get a hand raise? Who is like a developer in the room here? Okay. And who is from the business, sort of business side of things? Okay. And who knows about who's seen K2 as the company before? So, all right, brilliant. All right, anybody use a hybrid of cloud and on-premise? If I can get an idea of who's sort of in a hybrid scenario with on-premise, okay? And who's completely in the cloud, like nothing? Wow, okay, one person. Well done. Awesome, okay, great. So there's a little bit of a mix of technologies here, and both in the cloud and on-prem, so hopefully I'll be able to highlight a lot of that for you. Okay. All right, you might have noticed me yawning a few times. It's not because of Dave's presentation, I promise. I just had a baby, it's 5 weeks old, and being a tech head has provided me the first time to get some sleep, except for preparing the demo, so. Okay, all right, so what we're gonna do is, I'm gonna run you through this demonstration. Before I start, I'm actually gonna bring up the process that we're gonna go through, so you can get an idea of what we're actually gonna run through. So the idea here is that we need to, I wanna take Dave's app that he created, and we want to now take it and really create it end to end. And what we want to do is allow people to fill in information that they want to become a vendor or a partner or a customer of ours, First thing is I hate typing stuff in, so I rather create things that I can get them to fill in for me. I don't have to rekey it, and I can't spell. You'll probably see that in the demonstration today, but be able to get that so that people fill in that information. So filling in a form is going to kick off this process. What's going to happen is we're going to go and then create a Yammer post internally and get everybody to let us know, is that customer currently having a legal battle with somebody that's one of our other customers that we shouldn't get involved in, or whatever it is. One of the ideas there was a super fund in Australia really doing work for doctors, and they were investing in tobacco companies. You know what I mean? So it's really not the ethical thing to do. But if they had socialized that, they probably could have been more aware of that kind of thing just by outsourcing some of that knowledge and getting that feedback in as well.
And I'd ask you to think kind of a little more broadly about the realm of the role of social in an enterprise app context. We're working with an interesting customer right now in Hong Kong, as an example, who's in the apparel business. And what they want to basically do is use social as a way of being able to think about getting ideas and ideas for other people's ideas and feedback, utilizing a social paradigm and being able to tie that into the core of the business process for overall idea lifecycle management within their organization. So there are a whole range of ways that you can think about applying social technology besides just the context that you see here today.
Okay, so having a look at the process, we're going to do some Yammer posting inside there. We're then going to go to a review sort of approval stage where somebody needs to review this detail, but have that information available to them about those posts that are going on inside of Yammer so they can make a right decision there. If it's accepted, it can go to manager review, and that's a sort of standard loop cycle that can take place. After that, what we want to do is we want to go out then to a third-party technology called DocuSign. Anybody heard of DocuSign? Okay, so what we need is we actually need digital signatures. I'm busy trying to sell my house at the moment, and I got the agents just a few minutes ago sending me pieces of paper via email, asking me I need to sign it immediately, and I don't have a printer here to print it out and to sign it. I wish I'd use something like DocuSign so I can actually just sign it,
Anyway. My original app that I put together, that I talked to you about earlier on, it used DocuSign, but it used DocuSign pretty much in a silo in its own right. DocuSign provide really great integration into both offerings like Office 365, into Microsoft Word, to be able to allow me to very quickly set up context and sign. But once I've done that, I have a very siloed signing experience. I don't have a way of being able to tie that into the entire process, which is really what I want to be able to do here to get insight.
And it would mean that somebody else would need to know how to do that as well. So they'd have to go to that DocuSign area and understand how to actually use the product and send it through, where in this case we've incorporated in the process. So part of the process, it does all of that, and the people that are using it don't even need to know how to do it. It's just going to happen for them. After that, what we're going to do is we're going to wait for those signings to come back. Once everybody's signed, we're then going to do a number of things. We're going to go and create some Yammer groups for internal and external communication with that particular vendor. We're going to go and create a plan inside a planner. And we're actually doing something that Planner can't do. Planner doesn't have the ability to create templates at the moment. I'm sure it's going to come soon. But at the moment, when you want to create a new plan, you've got to go to a new plan and build a whole plan from scratch. So if you've got like a planner, like a template that's saying these are the sort of things you want to do every time we bring on a new customer, you kind of build that yourself. So what we've done is we've created a planner plan around onboarding of a new customer or vendor. And what we're doing is we're reading that and then recreating that as a new version of it, if that makes sense. So sort of like templating it. We then go and do things like set up that account inside of the dynamic CRM environment, where that ultimately needs to end up. Create the contact for that account. There's some SAP systems that need to be updated, which are on-premise. Then we go and create a SharePoint site, send the links to all that stuff into that SharePoint site, so they've got a collaborative area for that customer with all the links to all the assets that are out there. Anyone use Trim in the audience? A few? Okay, so one of the things we need to do is that contract that was signed with the signatures, well, that's got to end up in our corporate record management system. So that's going to go and be uploaded inside there, but then still be exposed and accessible inside of our dynamic CRM or inside of our SharePoint environment. So we're going to connect those up together, and that's an on-premise solution, and then send out some notifications and some reviews that happen after a certain period of time. Okay, so that's an example of the end-to-end process. A lot of moving parts, a lot of technology involved in here. So let's go and kick it off and run through an example of that process. All right, so what we've got here is our little accounts area. This is the SharePoint list that sort of starts it off. We actually want to keep this data inside of the SharePoint list. We don't want to put in CRM straight away, because only once it's approved do we then want to go and update the system. So it's almost like a temporary area for this information until we've done all the checks and balances. So I'm just going to go inside here and click on New and open up a new form. So this is a little form sitting inside a SharePoint. But what I've done is this form is also now built using, well, we built it using K2. But what it allows me to do is to now take this outside. So for those of you in the audience that have got a phone, you can either go to that tiny URL address or send a text message with the word onboard to that number, and then you can get that phone on your mobile device right now, and you can see what it looks like and perhaps fill it in. And those that do fill it in will pick a name out of the list to win the prize. There we go. I knew that would get some phones going. So yeah, that'll get that information inside there. So just some details of account, just an account name, whatever it might be, maybe your first name, whatever it might be, make something up. I'll go fill one out as well, and then we'll run through that scenario. Okay. All right, so give it a couple of seconds to get the detail, but I'll start filling mine in. So let's name the account, the company that we're going to do today. Central C. I'll call it Central C. That's the room that we're in now, so that'll be the company that I'm going to onboard. Central C. Okay. So Central, I'll call it Central C. This account type is going to be a vendor. I'll just choose an industry here. I'll choose a currency. Now what's happening is all these drop-downs are actually coming from a mix of on-premise and in the cloud information to be populated here. The next thing, I'm just going to use my current location. Fill that in over here, and I'm going to fill in some details of the primary contact. So this is the primary contact, will become the primary contact inside of the CRM system in the background. So James Bonder. So it's my mobile and my email. So I'm going to use a fictitious email here. I've got k2igniteu@gmail.com. Right, so the email that's used here is the one that's going to be used for the DocuSign signing. So after I've done my demo, afterwards I'll run through your guys and you'll be able to interact with that whenever you get the task to do that. All right, so I'm going to hit submit. And effectively what that's going to do is save my data. So if I go to my accounts SharePoint list now, what we can see there's Central C, and somebody else has already filled one in there. So there's Central C, that's the one that I just did now. And we're going to run through that one and see the experience. What's also happened while I've done that, if I go into my Yammer and I just refresh that particular group, refresh it over here. There we go. I can see quite a few of you guys are filling those in. So now I'm going to find the one that I'm actually demoing. There we go. So there's Central C. So that's a Yammer post that's now coming to Yammer and saying, hey, everybody, we're about to onboard these loads of new vendors and partners. Any feedback on these particular ones? So I'm going to go in as a different user here. I'm going to go in here as Igor onto this particular screen. Let's refresh this one. That's my email going off with all the posts coming in. So it's great. Let's see, Chris. Central C. Wow, there's lots of them.
And this can be structured in all kinds of ways. Right now what we've done is we've fed this all into a single universal Yammer group. We can create groups that are related to individual companies, and then the experience is basically in the context of those individual groups. You can feed it to information or into existing groups that happen to be affiliated with different types. So for instance, if you've got a group of people that are assessing information related to a partner organization versus a vendor versus a customer, they could be fed into completely different Yammer groups, and that can all be done just by setting up a set of rules.
Okay, so I've just made a post here. I work near this vendor and could pay them a visit at any time. So it's my little post that I put inside there. So let's go back to our process. Now what's happened is that we've now started a workflow process. We've created that Yammer post, getting that collaboration or that social aspect coming through. And now I'm going to go to my task list, and what you can see is I've got a task as the administrator here of confirming any of those new accounts. So I need to review them. So I can see quite a few of you guys coming inside. Yeah, let's find my particular one. Sure. There it is, Central C. Okay, so I'm going to go and review that particular account. All right. So opening that up, it opens up a little form that I can go and review. And what this form is going to do it's now connecting to a number of those different systems and bringing me up relevant information. The one thing it's doing over here is that it's showing me it's using something called signal R. So while I'm looking at this form, I can see there that Ian, who's somewhere at the back there, did for me. He's just actually added a warning. Trump has just bought 55% stake in Central C. So that's a little post that's live. While I'm looking at this form, about to make a decision, he's filled in that post in Yammer. We're using Microsoft Flow to pick up the fact that there's that new post and send that over to K2. So a little bit of Flow being involved inside there. K2 is receiving that, and then it's sending out this little notification and updating the form dynamically as I'm looking at it. So I'm not looking at old data at any time. I'm getting the latest sort of information coming inside there. All right. So now I'm not too sure about this customer anymore because we've got someone living close to them, but Trump, or maybe that'll increase business for it. That might be a good thing, right? So I can also go and have a look at any existing customers and do a search here against my CRM system. As I go down, I can see the details of that particular account, the information that was filled in, and then I can start to make decisions here. So one of the things that I want to do, is go and allocate a manager to this particular account. So I'm going to allocate Igor. And I'm going to go and specify a template, and I want to generate a contract. So this has actually kicked off a little process in the background that is now generating a contract for this. So we've got a bit of document generation taking place inside here. I've got some notifications that are coming up while I'm doing that, letting me know that it's merging the fields, all the sort of stuff that's happening in the background, so I know what's happening. And then it's going to take that document, it's going to upload that to the appropriate SharePoint location for collaboration. So I don't need to know where to go and upload this to. It's going to do that automatically for me, and then present me with that document to go and edit. So if we go down over here, there we go, it just happened. It says the contract's been generated. I can now go and edit it. I open that up. So this is all seamless. I don't have to figure out where and what system it's in. It's just being presented to me. So it opens up that demo partnership agreement between Central C and K2. What I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to edit it in the browser. Straight to that. And if I scroll down, you can see it's filled in, Central C, the location, all that sort of data has been input into this Word document. As I scroll down to the bottom, it's also got a place now for James Bonder and Igor Jurasevich to sign, which we're going to have signatures in there a little bit later. Looking at this contract, I'm going to make a modification to it. I'm going to highlight this little section here and strike it out. And then I'll also go and make it red. And maybe I'll add a little baby clause for the baby, something like that, just to change it up a little bit. So that's getting saved automatically to the correct location. And then once that's completed, I can pretty much just get on with the process. There we go. So I'll close that off. And I'm going to go inside here and pretty much submit that off. So before I do, let's have a look where we are inside of this process. So this is the live view of the workflow as it's taking place. You can see the Yammer post happened. We're now sitting at that first review stage. We can track this. We can see exactly how long it takes. Escalations can fire off if it takes too long. There's all that sort of tracking and manageability that runs behind this. Well, I'm done with this. I'm going to go and accept it and send this over for the review. All right, so that takes place. Go back to my home. And if I just now log in as Igor, so he's the manager that's been allocated. There we go. The task has just appeared on Igor's task list. So now I'm sitting inside a SharePoint. I could actually be now a dynamic CRM user and pick up that task as well. Or I could be on my phone. I couldn't share my phone on the computer, unfortunately. But I can pick that up as an email sent to me on my phone and reply to it, or in a mobile task list, and actually even interact with it in an offline mode. So let's say I'm sitting on an airplane. I could interact with that, add some comments, write additional notes, submit that off, and then when I get off the plane and it synchronizes, it'll actually update all that information as well. So it's different ways that people can interact with those different tasks. Okay, right. Just for sake of speed, I'm not going to open up the form and do a whole review of it. I'm just going to go to my task list and simply accept it from my task list as well, or switch on my out of office and maybe redirect it to someone else. But let's just accept it over here. So I accept that particular task. Let's go back now and have a look at what's happening here. So there my process has moved to the review. After that, it should go to, there we go. Now it's gone into the DocuSign steps, which is actually a little sub-process, which needs to collect signature, build up the signature collection system. And then it's going to go and wait for those signatures to take place. So effectively, we're busy going through a process that we have control over, and now we're handing this over to another system. So we've moved, because DocuSign's got its own process that now needs to take place, sending out the signatures, auditing that, and everything that takes place. So what quite often happens is that's like a black hole, right? It's moved off our view, and now it's gone into some other system. But what we want to do is be able to see what's going on inside there without leaving the context of the application that we're working in at the moment. So we're going to go and do that. I'm simply going to go back to here, go to my DocuSign portal. So this is within inside of the context of my Office 365 environment. I can go and have a look at my sent items. There I can see my central C one that's been sent. And over here I can see it's been sent to James, Igor Jurosevich and James Border for signature, and there's an audit trail of what's happening so far. This is not data that is in my location. This is data that is actually sitting inside of DocuSign. And I can now peer into that environment based upon the eventing model that they've got and see actually what's going on inside here.
So we see lots of scenarios today where customers look at this and they say, wow, I'm getting this inordinately powerful utility of being able to have endpoint signatures facilitated by something like DocuSign, but this could very well have been Adobe eSign. It could have been any one of the digital signature vendors out there. In this particular case, we're doing it with DocuSign. But the goal here is to be able to then provide you with much deeper insight into what's actually going on within that particular system. Because today what a lot of people do is they're forced to go to a DocuSign separate console, figure out how to navigate to that console to get to the right data, and only then can they get the information they want. And the problem with that is that I then have lost all the context of the business data that I'm actually working with. So the ability to combine these two things together and do it in a very comprehensive, integrated way is something that is super important for a lot of customers today thinking about utilizing these technologies in an integrated manner.
Okay. So what I've done is I've logged into my little demo Gmail account over here. So this is the vendor. And I can see there's a contract for Central C that's come through. So I'm going to go into that. I can go and review that document. So I'm opening that up. And what you'll notice is while this is happening, on our little DocuSign portal, I'm not going to refresh this page. You'll see this page automatically is going to refresh as things take place. So we can see it's currently sent, and we'll see the actual status updates when those events trigger. Oh, I have to go here and say I accept, continue. So there's the contract that we're looking at. This is now DocuSign part of things, and I can see the embedded stuff. I'll go next. It'll take me down to the bottom. I can see that ruled out stuff and the present for baby, that I put in a little bit earlier while we were collaborating around this contract. And I'm going to go here and say, let's sign that off. I have a pen. Hold on a second. There we go. Let's do a little drawing. Who is it? James Bond, right? So James Bonder. Okay, not the best signature, but an attempt. All right, so I've added my little signature. It kind of looks like my normal signature, actually. That's quite funny. Anyway, so I've added that little signature inside there. I'm going to hit finish. And that's pretty much this external vendor having signed the contract that's taking place. This is what's irritating me at the moment with the sale of my house, is that I can't do that, right? So I close that off. And if I go back to my little portal over here, what you can see here is James, it's been delivered, and he's as a signer. In a couple seconds, that should automatically refresh to signed, right? So there we go. So that's completed. But we're still waiting for Igor. So our process is still waiting. We're still peering into DocuSign. Let's go and finish the other signature. So I'm going to open up my email for Igor. Let's open up this particular one. So in this case, I'm an internal person. I've got a DocuSign account, so I don't have to even click it already knows who I am in my signature. So I come along inside here, look at the details. I can see James Bonder's signature, and you're going to see it's very similar to mine. When I just click on it, there's my signature already preloaded, sitting inside of there, and I'm happy with that, and I'm going to finish that off. Here we go. So going back to our little DocuSign portal over here, give it a couple of seconds, and we should see that refresh. There we go. So that's all completed. Audit trail taken care of. Document generated with those signatures sitting inside there. And what that means is that our workflow process over here can now continue. So even though that was a whole bunch of stuff happening in a totally separate system, we had complete visibility over it. We could track exactly what was going on. And that process is now coming back to this process and continuing. So you're seeing this internal and external sort of collaboration of processes across organizations taking place here. So that's now come back, and in parallel, what we have going on here is we're creating that Yammer group for our internal and external that's taking place. We're creating a planner plan, and we're setting up that custom inside of Dynamics 365 at the same time. Where if you imagine somebody would need to go and do all these sort of things and, you know what I mean, pass that data around, this is now all an automated experience taking place. So let's go into Planner and have a look what's going on here. So if I go into Planner, let's give that a refresh. So what was the customer we made today? What are they called? Central C, right?
Yep.
Don't see it. There we go. Whew. So there's Central C vendor, just appeared now, all right? So if we go through and log into that, so let's give this a couple seconds. Hopefully we can actually watch it get built. Let's take a couple seconds to see that take place. Right. Maybe something went wrong. So let me just go drill down into my sub-little process over here. There we go. So this is the little sub-process that's taking place, letting me know the sort of things that are happening in that particular application. So I can see from here that it created the group, created the plan. It was going to go through each of the items of the template and start to create them. And I can see exactly at that specific point in time the demo gods got me and we've thrown an error. I guess it's actually quite good as well that I can see what's happened. I can see exactly where the area is, and the fact is that I can go and fix that area and trap that area as well. So I can go and have a look at that and actually investigate what actually took place over there. So let's go and have a look at that. These are my different processes that I have running. So let's go and have a look at our customer account onboarding, our that's a DocuSign one. Create account onboarding plan. That's the one for, so that's the process there. I can see it's currently in an error state, and I can see what the error is, and I can see that, so this is a problem with the API at the moment. The planner doesn't return the ID sometimes. So that's actually what's taken place in my particular example. So you're going to watch me fix an error here. I hope it's okay. So what's happened is, it's called the API, it's created the planner, and the planner hasn't sent me back an ID, and then it's trying to create a bucket in the plan without the right ID, and that's caused a bit of a problem.
Yeah, the planner service from an API perspective is still in beta from Microsoft. It hasn't yet been released. And so we're spending a lot of time working with that team right now, giving them a lot of feedback on what needs to be done, how to make this more comprehensive. And so, you know, but I'd asked Igor to show you this independently of kind of what happened through the demo.
Yeah, so this is quite good to see as well. This is, I guess, if you're looking at process, you need a process that's not going to, when something goes wrong, is dead in the water and you have to restart the entire thing over again. You need to be able to pick up when something goes wrong and be able to get yourself out of trouble. And that's what I'm going to try and achieve now. So I'm just going to go into the Central C one that failed. Just going to go over here and just, where's delete? Edit plan. They've hidden the delete quite deep in here. So there's delete plan, and it deletes the group and everything. So I'm happy with that. Click. So that doesn't exist anymore. So now what I'm going to do is go back to my error that took place. So that's the Central C one. I'm going to tell it to go back to the activity, and I'm telling it to go back to the start. So click on OK. So I can see that's now active and running. So what you'll see, it crashed over here. If you remember, it threw an error. I've deleted the failed attempt, sent it back over here, and then this should go through and create that again. It takes about 45 seconds. I've actually got a little delay here of 45 seconds before it tries to create the plan, just because of some of the interesting things that are happening behind the scenes there. If I do things too quickly, it gives me a few problems. All right. So if we go back into Planner Hub, let's give that a refresh. This is what I'm going to ask Dave. There we go. So Central C is being created again. So that's created the plan. And if we go back and have a look inside, sorry, let's have a look there. Just going to wait for it to see if it throws that error again after it's created the plan. Has everyone got their fingers crossed? Should go. There we go. All right, it's busy. Brilliant. So let's go into Central C. And let's have a look what's happening. There we go. So as you see on the screen now, it's creating a few things. So one thing is it's creating the different phases, phase 2 and phase 3 sort of rollout and sort of things that it's busy creating. You can actually see it's busy running through it at the moment and still busy creating all the different steps in it. It just missed out the first phase, I think, because of the way I retried the error. We can even get it to go and check off some of those items. I'll show you a previous one that ran through quite well. Let's have a look, Logitech onboarding one. Let's have a look at this one. So this is an example of one that created phase 1, which was a setup. We need to do an intro call. We need to go and send out an account pack. So these are human things that need to take place as part of this setup of this project. But if you remember, what we used to have was other things like set up the account, set them up on the portal, create the Yammer group, set them up on Dynamics 365. Yes, we had those, and people would have to go and do that, and that took time and effort to do. We kept it on the plan, but we got the process to actually strike them out as it's completed. So we can see those have actually been completed. And then the rest things, and obviously having a massive party is the most important thing that happens at the end of that process. So if we go back, that's our process now completed. That's our main workflow. It's created the planner plan. Let's just give that a refresh over here. So our process is finished. Next thing it's doing is uploading that contract into the record management system, and then we'll actually be able to go in and have a look at what that looks like. It's also going to create a little Yammer post letting us know about the new details that have been created. Let's just have a look if that's come through as well. So you can see there's a customer group here called Central C. So that's the internal-external group that we can now communicate with that particular vendor for that, and they get an invitation to come and join that group. And over here, we've onboarded Central C. We can find their SharePoint site over here. So if I click on that, that's taking me to a SharePoint site that's just been specifically created for this customer, for us, a collaborative area. But inside of here, I've got some links. And I've included a link here to the Yammer group, to the plan, and to the Dynamics CRM account that's created. So let's go through to the Dynamics CRM account. Or Dynamics 365, I should be calling it. So here's Central C. You can see there's James Bonder created as a particular contact inside there. All the correct data is inside here. And what we're also having a look at, this is now a view into my on-premise record management system. There's the contract for Central C outside of the HP record manager. And I can say, well, let's have a look at that particular record out of that backend system. And here's the record that's been created. And if I go down to the signature panel, I can see there that the signature is valid. Normally when you click on it, it drills down to it, but let's scroll down to the bottom over here. There's all the contract data, the thing about the baby over there, and those two signatures, validated signatures. You can see they're actually valid signatures sitting inside there as a record in the system, viewed from the cloud play, from viewing it from Dynamics 365, even though that's an on-premise HP trim record that I'm viewing inside of that. All right. Then the last thing that we can also then go and do is go and look at some of the status of all these different onboardings that are taking place. So if I go back to the portal over here, go to my Dynamics 365 accounts little view. Okay. So what we're looking at over here, let's just give that a refresh. So what we have a look at here, this is just a very simple report that I honestly knocked this together about half an hour before the last thing I forgot to do was a little dashboard. But this is showing me a little report of the particular process we go through. What are the biggest steps and delays in that process? And I can see here one of the biggest ones over here is this particular step, which is the review stage. And obviously, I speak the most during that particular step. I can see how many of mine I've got that are completed, and I can see I've got 34 active. So that's thanks to you guys submitting a whole bunch of those for me, and none of them have escalated yet. These are the accounts that have been provisioned in the Dynamics 365 environment. So I can go to Central C and click on it. And then what it's doing is it's saying, okay, well, what would be quite useful is that if I go to that particular account, I click on it, it's bringing me back any Yammer posts that are mentioning that particular customer. So from here, my little dashboard, I'm seeing Central C, there's a Yammer post mentioning that particular customer. And what it's also trying to do at the moment, it's just busy taking a bit longer now, is bringing up any of the planner statuses. Let's try that again. It's bringing back any of the planner statuses of what's currently going on inside a planner. So inside a planner, I can see there's quite a few activities that are 0% complete at the moment, you know what I mean? And I can go and track and see exactly what's going on inside there. So you remember Dave mentioned all these systems overwhelming. So here I've kind of brought them all together as part of an end-to-end process. The process is setting the things up in the right places. And for me, I'm still coming to a central location and getting a view into everything that's going on across those different systems. Whether they other done Office 365 applications or even non-Office 365, and even on-premise applications as well. Okay.
You want to go back? I think we're good.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Brilliant. What I will do is, while Dave's talking, I will start to go and approve some of the ones that you guys have submitted off. So later on, you can get him to see what it's like signing a DocuSign. You'll see a contract in there. You can do it on your phone. It's quite cool. You can use your finger to sign it and be involved in that. What we also have is you can also go to playwithk2.com.au afterwards. And inside of play.k2.com.au, we've got a place where you can register for our demonstration environment where we've got loads of, we'll put that up afterwards, loads of different demonstrations and stuff like that. But let's go back to those slides.
Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, the goal for us here was just to show you how we think about taking a range of these productivity application services that in this particular case Microsoft and others are delivering and tying them together into the context of an application. Now, whether you do that with K2 or whether you do it with custom development or whether you do it with some other technology that's going to let you do it, the thing that's super important to keep in mind is that there are some very fundamental best practices that need to be taken into account, because it's easy to make this incredibly complex, deliver something that may just be very tactical, and then not be able to figure out how to be able to get more utility out of this at the speed of the business. And so let me talk a little to some of those things from a learning's perspective. So I'm going to skip through this because you saw a range of these things. The only point that I'll make around this is that when you think about the context of what it means to deliver a business application, it's important to think about this in the context of the technology enabling you very easy, rich user experiences to be able to design and build these applications. It's important to think about line of business integration with various of these systems and not to trivialize the problem, and I'll come back to that in a minute. I talk about this concept of accelerators or templates, and you saw an example of how Igor thinks about that in the context of a process, in fact, is generating a template that manages this particular context in our particular case in Planner, but it could be a template for the entire application itself that can be deployed. Mobile is just as important a thing, and a user experience. User experience for apps is everything. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if users can't use these things in the context of the tools and technologies that they work with to engage in these particular apps every day, it doesn't matter how great the application is going to be. Reporting and analytics, we'll talk a little bit more about earlier on. Igor showed you a snippet of what's possible when you can think about this in the context of reporting. So let me talk about a couple of these things. Integration is always incredibly interesting. People trivialize this problem. And the reality is the devil is in the detail. Why is the devil in the detail? When you're trying to tie into something like a Planner or a Yammer or anything else, these APIs are complex. They are not easy to work with. There's not very good information around what to call when, how to deal with the fact that things are synchronous or asynchronous, and everything else becomes very complicated. And we haven't even talked about authentication, which adds a whole new level of complexity to dealing with integration in its own right. So just my suggestion to you is when someone says to you, we need to connect this application with X, none of that is a trivial problem. And there are lots of things to think about in terms of what needs to happen when it comes to doing it. We see people trivializing this by taking things like a universal account that I might connect to something. And then all of a sudden, we need to have to worry about things like, how do I ensure that when the tool that I'm using, whether it be K2 or anything else, is accessing that account, it's accessing it in the context of the user that has rights to certain things rather than not. And so lots of complexity there. Cloud to on-premise integration considerations is something that I will say to you is still an issue today for many organizations. It is not easy to solve this problem. You put a lot of your technology into the cloud, you have a lot of investment in various things on-premise, and now you need to be able to touch back to those on-premise systems. It's a very complex problem to try to solve. People solve it by putting in place VPNs, and they try to solve it by exposing these cloud or these on-premise services with a set of cloud services on the edge of their firewall and other mechanisms. But the reality is none of these things come easy, and it's something that needs to be taken into consideration very carefully in order to maximize how you can think about using this. I have a comment there on the third line that is called adopt and in a reusable and extensible way. I can't stress this enough. We see so many people today doing integration in a way that is specific to the individual app. Those integration pieces that Igor showed you, do something with Planner, do something with Yammer, do something with Dynamics 365, touch trim, that's not just relevant to an account onboarding experience. It's relevant to probably 50 other applications that the organization either may be deploying now or might be planning to deploy in the future. And making it such that integration is reusable and externalizable is absolutely key to solving this problem. Otherwise, you're going to duplicate the same integration multiple times in the context of multiple apps, and we see this happening everywhere within customers today. It is an enormously important point to take into consideration for building out these kind of things, because in the same way that Igor showed you one app, there are thousands of those applications. And having that level of utility and efficiency is a key thing that we need to be able to solve. Security is a non-trivial problem. Again, you're going to hear Microsoft and others talk about new investments into technologies like OAuth 2 and so on. All of those technologies are fantastic, but along with them comes unbelievable complexity and security management that need to be put in place. And so thinking about these things and making sure that the technology investments you're making to deliver these kind of integrations is important. And these integrations evolve all the time, and so they're new things. The Yammer team, as an example, has a habit of changing APIs every 3 months, and they deprecate old APIs. And so it's super important that if you have 50 apps that are trying to use those APIs, that you're not modifying the integration 50 times, because it'll be a nightmare for you. You'll never keep up with being able to innovate ever. And that's just one service. And so thinking about some of these is an important thing. And this is not designed to scare you off. It's really designed just to be able to go and say, there are some things to really consider when it comes to putting together applications like these, irrespective of what technology you use to do that with. I talked about user adoption being everything. It's incredibly important to have tools that allow you to visually design things. But it's more important to be able to have this ability to say, let me be able to design once and truly run multiple times in multiple places. The technology world calls this responsive design. And the tools need to be able to support responsive design so that you truly can design something once and use it in multiple places, even if those multiple places are going to be new things that don't exist today. And so that's an important consideration. The user interface needs to plug directly into the integration layer. If you can't solve that problem, then what you end up building is standalone user interfaces that don't know how to connect to anything. And then you have to plug those two things together. And that's a hard problem to solve in its own right. Again, very often something that is solved by taking a code-centric approach. One thing that I will just say here as well on this particular item is that user interfaces are complex. And we see very often someone coming to us and saying, I just got a simple form. There is no such thing as simple forms, just as there's no such thing as simple workflows. They don't exist. If someone turns around and says, you know, when I hover over this thing here, something's got to pop up and it's got to change this and do this and look up something there. That could require 5,000 lines of custom JavaScript. You need an ability to know that your logic can be managed in a rich, integrated way, just as everything else is. And it's super, super important. People look at this and they go and say, well, custom JavaScript isn't code. Well, that's rubbish. Okay? It is just as much code as anything else is today. And it requires manageability in exactly the same way. And And so just something to be very, very careful in thinking about carefully. And I will say this one thing. I always believed when we started working in a mode that was all about not doing a lot in offline, I kind of looked at it and thought, in today's connected world, how many companies truly have an offline problem? I'll tell you right now, it is amazing. The largest, most connected companies that we have and we work with around the world today all have offline problems. And every one of them expect that the investments they're making into user interfaces are such that those things can run online and they can run offline. And they can do both where relevant. And so don't ever think that this online world is all about always connected and that's always going to be good enough, because it may not necessarily be. And focus on managing change. If there's ever an area, Shell is an interesting customer for us, and I'll just use them as an example because they're one of the few customers that have done a lot of research in this space. They went and done a bunch of analysis, and this has nothing to do with K2. It was in the application architecture team. They did a bunch of analysis that basically found out that in the past 100 apps that they had built, almost 72% of the time that people were spending on building that app was building user interface. Not building process, integration, all this other stuff, UI. And so by default, what they found is that more than 72% of the effort when the business needs change and evolving those applications is changing and modifying user interfaces. And so this is a very complex thing to deal with and needs to be thought about really carefully. It is incredibly easy to trivialize UI. I just got a tool, it drags and drops cool stuff around, it can connect to things. And then all of a sudden, the requirements change, and they always change. And obviously, and this goes without saying, everything that you're investing in a user interface paradigm today should be built upon modern standards. This is, whether it's with us or with anyone else, doesn't matter. This is a very well-defined and understood thing today. I'll talk about workflows just for a second. We see this a lot. Customers will come to us and say, my workflow needs are really simple. And we say to them, so what does simple mean for you? They say it's one-step approval. Okay, fine. So in that one-step approval, how many people need to approve? We don't know. Could change from one process to another. And do you have different roles that could approve things? Sure. And when people approve, do they approve in different time zones? People work in different time zones. And when we put escalations in place for those approvals, do the escalations need to understand those time zones? Absolutely. And when you have time zones and escalations, then do we need to think about how people work in their working hours? Sure, we need to. Or all of a sudden, it is no longer a simple workflow, even though it's one step. And the investments that you make in technology, and it doesn't matter whether it's with K2 or anyone else, need to support all those capabilities and more, because every single day those kinds of characteristics come up and they will burn you and burn you badly. And we have seen this with many, many, many customers today. It all looks great and awesome and fantastic and drag and drop, and then the stuff that's behind the scenes are the things that cause you to get burnt. I talk about this concept of focusing on enterprise class capabilities, even if you don't necessarily consider yourself to be an enterprise-sized customer. It doesn't matter. You could be a medium-sized business with enterprise needs, and most organizations are. And so thinking about these things is super important. There used to be a time about 10 years ago in the process world where analytics and reporting was kind of the thing that came afterwards. And so this idea that basically said, now that I'm automating something, I probably want to see how well I'm automating it. So give me some reports to understand what I've actually done. Today, it doesn't work that way. Today, analytics is so much in front of everything that very often it happens the other way around, that analytics and analytics events are driving process. And so these are just things that are important to think about. The other thing that's important to think about from an analytic perspective is that analytics is not just something that sits in a separate reporting dashboard. It's something that needs to be embedded into the context of tasks. Let me give you an example. If I'm using on the right-hand side over here an order-to-cash solution, and I'm just using that as a typical example, and I've got an approval stage for someone to approve a request for an order or a proposal, then one of the things that that person would love to be able to see in the same user experiences that they're working with to approve this is the fact that that particular customer has ordered this many things over the last 10 years, and they've defaulted on payments this many times in the last 1 year, and that we have this visual, graphical way of showing that information, even though what we're actually showing them is a task form. And having that capability embedded into this world is something that your applications need to be able to have in place. It is incredibly important to start thinking about leveraging commodity and analytics tools. A lot of our competitors have taken an approach that is really all about this idea that says, let's go and custom build analytics. We don't believe that. Microsoft and other vendors are doing an inordinately good job of providing some of the world's leading analytics capabilities. Why should we just not be a really great citizen plugging into that world? What you see here on the right-hand side is a Power BI report, essentially, Power BI dashboard. That Power BI dashboard is connected out of the box with K2, and in this particular case, with the K2 quote-to-cash process. And all the great benefits of Power BI, you just get for free. So when I go to the top there, for those of you who haven't seen it, and click on Ask a Question About My Data, I can go as a user and ask free format things. How many customers have I done quotes for in the following geography over the last 2 months in simple English? And the technology understands how to go and query all that information and render it out for you. We don't want to have to go and build that, and neither do you. You just want to get to leverage it in the context of the apps that you're putting together. And so think really carefully about that. I use Power BI as an example because we're at a Microsoft conference, but this applies to any analytics technology that you may be invested in as an organization, whether it's something like Tableau or something from Oracle or SAP, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. And the point I made earlier on is that ultimately at the end of the day, process data and line of business data, when brought together, are all about giving you data-driven decisions. It's interesting, when we talk to the business today, and it was interesting that very few of you put up your hands as someone in the business. When we talk to the business today, process automation is a really useful thing that people find, but the reality is that the business cares much less about that than the insights that they're getting into the automation, because it's those things that drive decisions for them, whether it be at the highest level from an enterprise data management perspective or at an individual process management level. It doesn't matter. I talked about mobility, and I won't beat this one to death. It's about designing once, using a very rich reuse paradigm. It's about having workflow and forms and user interfaces managed in a unique way together as an underlying application, and having the mobile experiences support that. Offline, we talked about earlier on. This ability to light up mobile device services. You saw, for instance, that in Igor's particular case, he had a form, and he clicked on a button that said, "Find me," and look up the address. That is going, picking up GPS coordinates, pointing to an online service, finding the address, and returning the address information. It would be much more relevant in your mobile experience when you did that on your mobile device than it was necessarily for him, because we were showing it to you on a PC. But these kinds of scenarios and being able to use native mobile capabilities is super, super important. And then again, every single one of these investments in mobile also need to be managed utilizing commodity industry standard mobile device management technologies, whether it be from Microsoft or whether it be from any other player. And if they can't, then that doesn't give you the manageability that you necessarily need. I talked earlier on about application management, and in fact, just because of the error we made, you happen to see Igor actually walk through that from a demonstration point of view, so I won't spend time on this. But whether you have a console or whether the tools you have provide this capability or whether you're going to build it in your own right, The reality is having a unified way of being able to manage these applications, the way you deploy them, the users who have access to them, and how they all work together in terms of error handling and so on is absolutely key for you to be able to do. We're running out of time here, and so I don't want to spend too much time on this. A lot of customers doing some pretty amazing things with applications across the globe today. I mentioned people like Microsoft. It's interesting for us. People say, why do we bring up Microsoft? And we bring them up because the world's largest company, software company, with essentially an unlimited amount of development resources, has realized that they can't meet the needs of the business at the scale that their business is demanding, and that looking at better ways of being able to deliver these applications is in their interest, just like it is in anyone else's. And so, it's a really good reference for us, but it certainly is an interesting data point as well. And you can see some of the others over here. And there are many, many more like this, and certainly locally here in Australia, the same thing applies. So, to finish this off, it's time to win. And as I mentioned earlier, right at the beginning, for some of you, I think, who are in here and others who may not have been, yes, we have a competition actually happening at our booth. And that's for a Surface 4 Pro, but we also have one here for one of these JBL Extreme devices. And I'm actually going to have Igor run this thing so that we can pick a winner. So Dave, my question to you is, we talked about a number of things that we integrated with across the Microsoft productivity stack as part of this demonstration. Can you name 3 of them? Yeah, across the productivity stack. Yeah. But that's not Microsoft. That's fine. Yeah. Yep. Okay, awesome. Great stuff. Thank you so much. So Dave wins a speaker. For those of you who are interested in learning more, as was mentioned earlier, obviously one thing that we'd be happy for you to do is to come by the booth. We actually have a number of books there as well. We put together a set of things for people who kind of want to look at very specific types of processes and get some kind of overall best practices and guidance for how to think about leveraging these. They're not necessarily all about K2. They're really all about these particular process areas. And so we definitely encourage you to come by, grab some of those from us.
So let me just fill in there. So we don't normally give those out just willy-nilly. But if you've attended the session, just come, just tell the people at the booth you attended Dave and Igor's session, and then you can pick one of the books. And there's a whole bunch of them. They're dummy books, so they're written quite nicely. Yeah, go grab your book. Definitely do that. They're worth it.
And then we always have people who will come to us and say to us, look, some of the kind of things you showed me today, how do I use those and how do I show them to other people within my company? So this particular URL you see at the top here called playwithk2.com.au is a place you can go to, and you can go and sign up. You can go and invite your own work colleagues to that environment, and you can get access to a range of these solutions that you can go and work with as if you were running with them in your own organization, giving your own colleagues a way to be able to experience it. Our customers love this. It's a really great way for them to kind of socialize, if I use that word, the experiences that they can use with these kinds of technologies and the sorts of things that they can do. And they are just examples of a broad range of capabilities, but they're a very good way of being able to get a very quick experience for, wow, that might be a problem I have in my organization. Let's look at maybe seeing whether there's an opportunity to be able to do more. And again, I'd like to thank you for your time, for being here today. For more information, please just reach out to us. We've got a team across Australia that's very, very happy to work with you on the engagements that you have and the things that you might have necessary or that you may need within your organization. So thank you again for your time, and I look forward to meeting you again at some time.